This is the number one way you could tell when you get older. When you could just be standing still.
Chappelle's show, the birthplace of legendary comedic moments, was also where Donnell Rawlings rose to stardom. Yet few would have guessed that while all of America was still laughing out loud at Ashy Larry, Rawlings himself was secretly contemplating leaving the show. Imagine turning down money, fame, and millions of fans, all because of a secret he had kept hidden for over 2 decades. And now at the age of 56, Rawlings is finally telling it all. What could drive a rising comedian to walk away from the spotlight? The answer will leave you stunned. Watch until the end of the video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to help us uncover this explosive secret. The mysterious childhood of Donnell Rawlings. To understand why, at the age of 56, Donnell Rawlings could reveal a decision that shocked the entire comedy world, we must first return to the beginning, the place where his personality, ambition, and lifelong stubbornness were formed. Because behind the laughter of Ashy Larry on Chappelle's show lies a turbulent childhood, marked by loss, the strict upbringing of a single mother, and the complex social environment of the 1970s. It was those formative years that laid the foundation for a Donnell Rawlings, who was both funny and gritty, always hungry to prove himself. And that story begins in a small home in Alexandria, Virginia. Born on December 23, 1968 in Washington, D.C., Donnell was raised solely by his mother. His father passed away when Rawlings was still very young, leaving behind a void that years later he admitted became a driving force in his quest for recognition and the laughter of others. Donnell moved with his mother to the city of Alexandria, Virginia, where he spent most of his childhood and teenage years. In a multicultural community fraught with social tensions in the late 1970s, Donnell gradually developed a humorous lens through which he viewed life, at times edgy, at times brutally honest to the point of controversy. His mother, Joyce Rawlings, was not only a single parent, but also a well-known figure in the Alexandria community. She was active in many social and political causes, a familiar face in local movements. Her strict yet resilient nature earned Donnell's deep respect, while also pushing him to grow up faster than most kids his age. He once shared that Joyce never allowed her son to give up easily, whether in school or in life. That discipline shaped Donnell into someone both stubborn and intolerant of injustice, traits that would later be vividly reflected in his socially charged comedic style. As a teenager, Rawlings attended T.C. Williams High School in Alexandria, the same school famously portrayed in the film Remember the Titans 2000 for its fight against racial discrimination in sports. Sitting in those classrooms, Donnell witnessed firsthand the cultural tensions between white and black students, leaving a lasting impression on him. It was also at T.C. Williams that young Rawlings began to realize the power of humor. He often told jokes in class using comedy to diffuse tension, and sometimes to protect himself in uncomfortable situations. But Rawlings's childhood wasn't all laughter. In his Alexandria neighborhood, street violence, drugs, and social inequality were inescapable realities. He once admitted that growing up in such a tough environment made him feel the constant need to prove himself. Even before realizing he would one day become a comedian, Donnell had already begun honing his observational skills, mimicking voices and gestures to entertain friends. Those small moments of humor in a poor neighborhood eventually became the bedrock for many of his iconic performances. A touching detail from his childhood is Donnell's struggle with the absence of a father figure. Many times he found solace in televised comedy shows, especially in the performances of Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy, two idols who would shape his future artistic path. Rawlings once said that the laughter from the TV helped him forget the emptiness inside, and deep down he harbored a dream of one day giving others that same kind of comfort. Donnell Rawlings's ambition to reach the top. Donnell enlisted and served in the U.S. Air Force in the late 1980s. He was stationed in South Korea and at Bolling Air Force Base in Washington, D.C., an experience that lasted several years. There, Rawlings not only learned discipline, but also gained exposure to a wide range of cultures. He once shared that it was during this time he learned to observe, mimic, and find humor, even in the harshest of situations. The broken Korean phrases he picked up as a soldier later became some of the standout comedic moments on Chappelle's show. After leaving the military, Rawlings began his journey into the world of stand-up comedy. In the early 1990s, Washington, D.C. became a hub for many black performers, and Rawlings quickly found his place in the Circuit, a network of comedy clubs catering to African American audiences. He wasn't an overnight sensation, but local crowds remembered him for his honesty, wit, and sharp observations of everyday life. His stories about neighborhoods, family, and the struggles of making ends meet, told with biting humor, made people laugh while striking a chord of recognition. It wasn't long before Rawlings caught the eye of major comedy shows. He appeared on HBO's Def Comedy Jam, one of the most influential launching pads for black comedians, which helped propel stars like Martin Lawrence and Chris Tucker. He also featured on BET's Comic View, a show that defined childhoods for millions of African American viewers. These appearances helped Rawlings move beyond local club stages and connect with a national audience. Interestingly, Rawlings's career wasn't confined to comedy. Before the entire country knew him as Ashy Larry, he had already proven his dramatic acting chops. He appeared in 3 episodes of the hit crime series Law & Order and later took on the role of Damian Day Price in The Wire. A deeply layered character, a former convict returning to politics with a troubled past. Rawlings surprised many with his solid dramatic performance, a stark contrast to his usual comedic image. When asked, he admitted, "It's funny, Chappelle's show was actually my first time doing comedy on television. Before that, I only did drama." Rawlings's versatility between comedy and drama made him a notable figure in the acting world. But the real turning point came in 2003, when he joined Chappelle's show. This was the moment Donnell Rawlings transformed from a familiar comic in the black community into a national star. His career entered a new chapter, brilliant but also full of contradictions that even now at age 56, he is just beginning to fully reflect on. However, it's important to acknowledge that his journey was anything but smooth. Rawlings had to hustle constantly to make ends meet, performing in shows where sometimes all he received was a smattering of applause. But it was that very persistence that shaped him into the kind of artist who could seize the right opportunity. When Dave Chappelle invited Rawlings to join the cast, it wasn't just a friend's offer, it was recognition of a talent honed over more than a decade on small, gritty stages. Donnell Rawlings's career path is a powerful testament that laughter doesn't come from fleeting luck, but from accumulated experience and unshakable perseverance. From a boy growing up without a father, to an Air Force serviceman, a hard-working stand-up comic on the black circuit, and eventually a dramatic actor on national television, each chapter helped mold the Ashy Larry that audiences around the world have come to remember. Scandals that shaped his character. When discussing why Donnell Rawlings once considered leaving Chappelle's show, it's impossible to ignore the scandals and controversies that helped shape both his character and career. These offstage incidents turned Rawlings into a complex figure, beloved for his loyalty and honesty, yet often criticized for his temper and impulsiveness. In 2007, Rawlings faced his first major shock in the media industry when he was fired from a morning radio show in New York. The reason stemmed from a joke referencing the Jewish community delivered in the wake of the Don Imus scandal, when the famous radio host came under fire for racially insensitive remarks. Amid a highly sensitive public climate, Rawlings's joke instantly drew backlash. Although he claimed he never intended harm, one moment of poor judgment was enough to undo years of image building. It was the first time Rawlings truly understood the price of crossing the fine line between comedy and offense. 10 years later, Rawlings's name was once again embroiled in controversy. In August 2017, a 20-year-old man accused him of assaulting him outside a New York hotel. The man said he was trying to film Dave Chappelle, Rawlings's close friend, when Rawlings allegedly punched him in the face. The incident quickly dominated headlines, making Rawlings a trending topic. He defended himself, claiming the swing was unintentional and that he had only been trying to protect Chappelle's privacy. Still, public opinion was divided. The police brought Rawlings in for questioning, and though no criminal charges were filed, the label of hot-headed entertainer stuck with him from that point on. In 2022, Rawlings stirred up even more debate during an appearance on the comedy podcast Kill Tony. Displeased with the host's teasing, he abruptly walked off stage in front of the live audience. The moment went viral across social media, drawing mixed reactions. Some criticized him as overly sensitive, while others defended his right to walk away. And the drama didn't stop there. In early 2024, Rawlings got into a heated shouting match at the Laugh Factory in Los Angeles. when comedian Corey Holcomb made jabs at him and Dave Chappelle Rawlings, sitting in the audience, suddenly stood up and yelled back, causing the show to come to a halt. The video of the confrontation quickly became a major drama in the US comedy scene. Rawlings later admitted, "I snapped because after 30 years of giving everything I have, being called untalented is something I just can't accept." For those who know him, it was a natural reaction from a proud artist. But for the wider public, Rawlings's image became even edgier and harder to predict. In retrospect, these scandals and controversies weren't just scratches on Rawlings's career, they were directly connected to his decision to leave Chappelle's show. They revealed a man who speaks out when disrespected, or when the honor of his friends, especially Dave Chappelle, is challenged. That fierce loyalty and strong ego have earned him both admiration and consequences. And they also laid the foundation for the most important choices in his career, standing by his friend, even if it meant walking away from the spotlight. Legacy with Chappelle's show. If personal scandals and controversies once made Donnell Rawlings a gritty and unpredictable figure, then Chappelle's show was the platform that turned him into a cultural icon. It wasn't just a turning point in his career, it was proof that a comedian from small club stages could become a face recognized by millions across America. Before 2003, Rawlings was already a familiar name in the black comedy community, having performed on Def Comedy Jam and Comic View, but he hadn't yet had the breakout moment to bring him into the national spotlight. When Chappelle's show premiered on Comedy Central, Rawlings wasn't just a side character. He became one of the program's pillars, alongside Dave Chappelle and Charlie Murphy. In fact, when Chappelle abruptly left during Season 3, Rawlings and Charlie were chosen to host the lost episodes, a decision that reflected the deep trust the production team had in him. The standout role was, of course, Ashy Larry. With his dry, ashy skin-cracked lips and his perpetually disheveled underwear, Ashy Larry was both hilarious and pitiful. This image quickly embedded itself in pop culture, becoming a nickname fans across the country would call Rawlings for years. Many people even recognized him as Ashy Larry before they knew his actual name. But Rawlings wasn't just a one-role wonder. He transformed into the pimp beautiful in Player Haters Ball, and Time Haters, where his jerry curl wig and flashy suits had audiences howling with laughter. His broken Korean, a holdover from his military service, became comedy gold in Time Haters as he volleyed back witty retorts. This kind of versatility made Rawlings a secret weapon, someone who could breathe life into any sketch with his distinctive humor. And then, there's the legendary catchphrase, "I'm rich biatch." That hoarse shout, tacked onto the end of each episode with the blast of a truck horn, instantly became a viral meme across America. From t-shirts and stickers to everyday slang, that line became inseparable from Rawlings and served as a personal brand stamp that couldn't be erased. To fans, Rawlings wasn't just the guy who acted with Dave, he was someone who helped shape a living, breathing cultural phenomenon. The impact of Chappelle's show on Rawlings's career is undeniable. Thanks to the show, he rose from a stand-up comic known mainly to black audiences to a nationally recognized performer. His stand-up shows afterward were packed with people eager to see Ashy Larry in real life. Rawlings once admitted, "I didn't make much money from the show, but it changed my name forever." This explains why even when financial concerns tempted him to leave, he still considered Chappelle's show an invaluable launchpad. More importantly, Chappelle's show placed Rawlings at the center of a transformative era in American comedy. In the early 2000s, the show shattered every boundary, boldly satirizing race politics and celebrity culture in ways television had never dared to do. Rawlings, along with Chappelle and Murphy, became pioneers in bringing black humor into the mainstream, not just to entertain, but to reflect harsh, uncomfortable truths. In that light, Rawlings wasn't merely an actor. He was a witness to a cultural revolution on American television. However, that brilliance came with immense pressure. Chappelle began to feel the show spiraling out of his control, becoming overly commercialized and drifting away from its original message. Rawlings saw it all, from the team's early days of energetic creativity to the point when Chappelle began losing his drive. For Rawlings, it was both the most radiant period of his life and the setup for his hardest decision. When the soul of the show wanted to walk away, could he still keep laughing like nothing had changed? The shock of Dave Chappelle leaving the show. Great heights often come with a sudden fall, and Chappelle's show is the most vivid example. At the peak of its fame, hailed as a cultural phenomenon of early 2000s, American television, no one could have imagined that Dave Chappelle, the soul, the heart, and the mind behind every sketch, would choose to walk away from it all. For Donnell Rawlings, it wasn't just a professional shock, it was a moment that forced him to reevaluate his entire perspective on loyalty, the glitz of fame, and the true value of comedy as an art form. The news that Dave Chappelle had turned down a $50 million deal from Comedy Central and flown to South Africa in 2005 hit like a bomb. It blindsided everyone, audiences, the press, and even those closest to Dave within the crew. Donnell Rawlings recalled that he hadn't received a single warning, not even a subtle signal from his close friend. That morning, like millions of others, he opened the paper and was stunned to read that Dave had vanished. The entire team, from supporting actors and writers to producers and crew, was left in a state of disbelief. In an instant, a machine that had been running smoothly ground to a halt. Rawlings described the feeling as if a live show had reached its dramatic climax, only to be suddenly cut off without a single goodbye. What's painful in hindsight is that Rawlings later realized the warning signs had been there. During the filming of the sketch Black Monsters, Chappelle suddenly blurted out, "Maybe $50 million isn't enough." At the time, Rawlings dismissed it as a throwaway joke. But when Dave disappeared, he came to understand that behind that line lay an unbearable exhaustion. Chappelle had been suffocating under the pressure from the network, the demands of commercial contracts, ratings, expectations, and perhaps most of all the frustration that some viewers were misinterpreting his satirical messages. The laughter, which was meant to expose social injustice, was being received by some as shallow entertainment. That distortion, that disconnect, drained Chappelle's spirit and ultimately pushed him to walk away. For Rawlings, the shock held multiple layers of meaning. First came the personal blow. Chappelle's show had transformed him from an under-the-radar comic into Ashy Larry, a character mentioned in households across the country, embedded in pop culture. And then, in an instant, it was gone. No warning, no closure. Then came the doubt. Should he continue with a show that had lost its creative heart? And more deeply, Rawlings asked himself, which path would he take? Clinging to the fading spotlight, or following the friend who had chosen to protect his artistic freedom? Comedy Central wasn't ready to let go of such a lucrative hit. To salvage what they could, the network decided to air the lost episodes in 2006, 3 unreleased sketches. Donnell Rawlings and Charlie Murphy were chosen as the hosts. On screen, audiences saw Rawlings banter, joke, and laugh alongside Charlie. But inside, he was a storm of emotions. To him, those episodes weren't a new beginning. They were a funeral for the show, a way to close the chapter with dignity. What haunted Rawlings was learning later that Dave Chappelle had not approved the airing of those episodes. To Dave, it felt like an unwanted continuation. When Rawlings heard his friend's perspective, he admitted to feeling deep regret. He once confessed that if Dave had just called and said, "Don't do it, I want no part of this," he would have said no instantly. But in the absence of that signal, Rawlings went along with momentum and carried the guilt for years to come. Dave Chappelle's departure left a scar on Donnell Rawlings' soul that never fully healed. It wasn't just the loss of work or stage lights. It was a lesson in how fragile fame truly is. What seems like an unshakable spotlight can vanish overnight. To Rawlings, it was a wake-up call. Art is not just about money or notoriety. It's about loyalty. It's about integrity. More than anything, that moment laid the groundwork for Rawlings' own decision. When a brother walks away from the stage to protect his creative freedom, can you stay behind just for the fame? That question lingered in Rawlings' mind for years, forcing him to confront himself. He understood that to remain true to both his values and his friendship, sometimes you have to walk away from things others would die to have. That's why the idea of leaving Chappelle's show slowly turned into an inevitable choice, not out of bitterness, but out of loyalty to the very principle Chappelle had chosen to uphold. Why Donnell Rawlings wanted to leave Chappelle's show. The reason he wanted to leave the show didn't stem from just one factor, but rather the convergence of 3 major concerns: financial independence and his own career loyalty to Dave Chappelle, and a deep belief in artistic integrity that he refused to compromise. Even at the height of Chappelle's show's record-breaking viewership, Rawlings still felt financially unstable. The compensation he received from Comedy Central didn't match the effort he was putting in. Meanwhile, his independent stand-up gigs were bringing in significantly more income. Rawlings once admitted bluntly, "I didn't make much money from that show." In essence, staying with the show meant sacrificing substantial earnings from touring. Consider the context. Between 2004 and 2005, Rawlings and Charlie Murphy were selling out shows in major cities thanks to the buzz from the show. A few weeks on tour could bring in far more money than several months of taping a television season. For an artist who had never truly known wealth, that kind of discrepancy wasn't easy to ignore. Faced with a choice, Rawlings had to ask himself, should he remain in a show that had lost its soul, or should he leverage his newfound fame to build an independent career where he had full control over his income and schedule? The answer gradually leaned toward the latter. In fact, after Chappelle's show collapsed, Rawlings and Murphy quickly capitalized on their popularity by launching a nationwide comedy tour. Audiences didn't just come because they liked them, they came out of curiosity to see the living legacy of the show. Rawlings realized that his career's future no longer depended on Comedy Central, it depended on him. The desire to leave began not from ego, but from very real financial logic. But money was only part of the story. The deeper motivation lay in the bond and loyalty Rawlings shared with Dave Chappelle. They weren't just co-workers, they were like brothers in real life. From backyard barbecues to family funerals, Rawlings and Chappelle had been closely connected for over 2 decades. So when Chappelle walked away, Rawlings couldn't just pretend nothing had happened. The release of the lost episodes in 2006 by Comedy Central placed Rawlings in a difficult position. He and Charlie Murphy were chosen to host and present the unaired sketches. At the time, Rawlings thought of it simply as a way to give the show a proper send-off, like a respectful funeral. But later, he found out that Chappelle had not approved the decision and felt betrayed. Rawlings would go on to say that if Dave had just made one phone call, he would have declined immediately. That guilt lingered for years and quietly became a vow. If Chappelle was no longer part of it, neither would he be. That loyalty is what sets Rawlings apart. While many might have seen Chappelle's exit as a golden opportunity to step into the spotlight, Rawlings chose instead to stand by his friend, even if it meant walking away from fame. For him, a career only meant something if it was built on friendship and mutual respect. The third reason, and perhaps the most profound, was Rawlings's belief in artistic dignity. He had witnessed Chappelle walk away from a $50 million deal in order to protect his creative freedom. That wasn't just a bold move, it was a lesson that art cannot be sold out. For Rawlings, this was a message that stuck. He understood that without Dave Chappelle's show would become a shadow of itself. The laughter would no longer carry a message about society, it would just become a commercial product. Rawlings had no interest in becoming a replacement, nor in watching his friend's legacy get watered down. He'd rather leave while fans still remembered Ashy Larry with a genuine laugh than stay and watch that authenticity fade. In interviews years later, Rawlings didn't hesitate to defend Chappelle, especially when the comedian faced criticism over sensitive issues like gender and trans rights. That loyalty didn't just come from friendship, but from shared artistic values. Both men believed comedy should be free to touch on uncomfortable truths. And if that freedom couldn't be preserved, Rawlings would rather step back than betray that principle. These three forces, financial independence, loyalty, and artistic integrity, intertwined into a knot that forced Donnell Rawlings to make a decision. He could stay, take the money, and ride the wave of temporary fame. Or he could walk away, knowing it would be harder, but preserving his loyalty and self-respect. Looking back, Rawlings has no regrets. He acknowledges that Chappelle's show changed his life, made him part of pop culture history, but also taught him an important lesson. No fame is worth more than friendship and integrity. That's why at age 56, he can now openly say that he once wanted to leave the show not as a rash move, but as the result of years of deep inner conflict. And maybe it's that very decision that defines Donnell Rawlings today, a comedian who dares to live by his feelings, who places values above wealth, and who was willing to step away from the spotlight to remain loyal to a kindred soul. At 56, Donnell Rawlings has finally revealed the reasons he once wanted to walk away from Chappelle's show: financial concerns, unwavering loyalty to Dave Chappelle, and a commitment to preserving artistic integrity. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a courageous choice to stay true to his beliefs. If you found this story compelling and want to keep uncovering untold behind-the-scenes secrets, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upcoming video.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore. Stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now during home screen.